it's improving the metabolic health, which is the topic which has been assigned to me. But unfortunately, it's rather I'm asked to discuss two preclinical or rather non-human studies which have looked at the time-restricted eating pattern and also the cardiometabolic health. So one is a study from Dr. Kylie Kavanagh. This was actually the concept is to present those papers in ADA to discuss it in Indian context. So this paper was presented by Dr. Kylie with respect to the time-restricted feeding and how it improves the cardiometabolic profile. So this is actually a primate study, a non-human primate study. She had done it in monkeys, where there were two groups. One was given Western diet ad libitum. So they were allowed to feed whenever they were hungry. And the other group was given Western diet on a time-restricted pattern. So from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., they were given access. So this intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating pattern, how it affects the primates also, this has been studied in this. And interestingly, they have taken two groups of non-human primates, the monkeys. One is the geriatric age and the non-geriatric adult age. So we know that it improves cardiometabolic health, but they've looked at how it is affecting the circadian gene expression and also the metabolic profiles. So the monkeys were studied after 2 months, after 8 months, and also after 12 months. So it was for a year that they were observed, and various parameters with respect to the adipogenicity or the biomarkers of adiposity, both adiponectin and the harmful biomarkers, every molecules were studied. The lipid profile was also studied. So what they found was that the lifespan actually didn't change. It is only for a year, so we cannot concur or give much importance to that. But the other parameters had significant difference. For example, in the ad libitum group, the serum triglycerides were higher. Whether it's geriatric or non-geriatric population, the triglycerides were higher. The HDL cholesterol was better in the time-restricted group. So both in geriatric and adult, the HDL cholesterol was better. There are also other complex parameters like the cholesterol efflux capacity. These parameters were measured, and it was found that the cholesterol efflux capacity was better in the monkeys were exposed to time-restricted feeding. So this actually paves way for improving the cardiometabolic health. And what they concluded was that both the body weight and the adiposity was actually similar, and the lifespan also was similar in both the groups. But then the biomarkers of cardiometabolic health was better. So this probably gives insight into the human metabolic profile also, where we've seen the time-restricted eating pattern improves a certain metabolic profile, especially with respect to the cholesterol level, and how it translates into the mortality and morbidity, long-term mortality, for example, and the cardiovascular mortality and cardiovascular run rate we are yet to see. So I think that was the first study. It was a pretty short paper. The second paper which I've been asked to discuss is with respect to circadian rhythm and metabolism. So this is from Dr. Aline Welge, who's a professor of pharmacology in Philadelphia. So as we know, with respect to circadian rhythm and endocrinology and also the cardiometabolic health, there are many aspects which have been already known. So the main clock or the regulator of the circadian rhythm is said to be the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain. And actually, it's a complex interplay which is dependent on the photo entrainment of these neurocycles. So the solar cycle, as we know, the circadian clock with the light and the day and the light cycles. The suprachiasmatic nucleus senses this and sends signals to both the endocrine and the nervous system rhythms. So this is how the periodicity of the endocrine system, as we know, the hormones which increase as we rise up, and in the night time there is an nadir of most of these hormones. There is also a regulation of the nervous system, which the neural cycle also is entrained by the photosensitivity of the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So there is an interplay between this and the oxidative and metabolic cycles. Both the hormones and the neuronal cycles give signals to the metabolic cycles. And this is something which an individual is trained with as he evolves in his life. And also there are certain genetic factors which also predispose to this. So there are so many transcription factors, activators, which are being increasingly identified. So this study actually they've tried to throw more light into this mechanistic aspects. So the baseline is that metabolism studies, but this is actually a study which is being discussed, is a study which is done in the fruit fly, drosophila. So there are studies which have been shown that the biological clock also determines the liver glycogen and the bile secretion. This, as we know, since many decades. So this factors, especially with respect to the human factors, there are so many other intervening or interfering things which has already happened, like the pollution level, the temperature control level, the food availability, the physical activity, then again time zone travel, shift work. All these factors are actually disruptors of the endocrine clock or the circadian clock. So all these activities, be it shift worker or the pollution level or adequate sunlight exposure is not given to train this circadian rhythm clock. All these activities are, as we know, associated with obesity, associated with other metabolic conditions like fatty liver, then worsening of glycemic control, high blood pressure, high dyslipidemia, sleep disturbance, obstructive sleep apnea, insulin resistance, and even depression is also one of the comorbidities. So all these factors can drive the cardiometabolic complications and lead to poor cardiometabolic or metabolic and cardiac events. So in this study, they've tried to look at the glucose metabolism in the drosophila, where they've actually given, it's a complicated topic which I had to read through many things actually was beyond our knowledge as a clinician, but there are two types of drosophila flies which they've studied. One is called as the fumin. Fumin is actually a mutant variety where it has decreased sleep wake cycle. So drosophila, as we have seen during our training days, drosophila or fruit fly is a very good model to study, which even though it's an insect or a fly, there are many genes which are kind of similar to human genes. And surprisingly, this fly has also got a circadian rhythm, which is similar to the human circadian rhythm. And there is a sleep cycle also, which is similar to the human cycle, but this is happening at a much microscopic parameter level. So, but nevertheless, certain metabolic studies which are impossible to be done in a living human or even primates, it's the fruit fly or drosophila study which has given insight to this. So in this study, they've taken the wild type or the regular drosophila, which is considered as a normal circadian rhythm, and a fumin mutant variant, which has got a disrupted circadian clock due to the disruption of the signaling in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So what was done was that they used isotope tracer of carbon C13, which was given in both these types, and they were given. The 6 samples were analyzed during their day. There is a fixed sleep-wake cycle of this drosophila, and the fumin has got a decreased sleep pattern. And they have plotted the metabolic parameters because it's a carbon skeleton which we can determine many of or most of these metabolic profiles, the Krebs cycle and glycogen cycle, gluconeogenesis cycle, 6 samples from each drosophila. And they observed the diurnal rhythmicity, and the diurnal rhythmicity is, as expected, lesser in that fumin mutant. So those drosophila which have not been able to maintain the circadian rhythm, the diurnal availability of molecules or the parameters are almost nil. So the major importance which they have given, the major insight that this study has given is that the insulin signaling, the insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity actually decreases in these fruit flies, which has got a mutant circadian rhythm or the fumin mutants. So both the cycles and the neuronal cycles are also, there is an aberration. The insulin signaling is decreased, especially this happens late in the evening and also early morning. So what they have seen is that the glucose values tend to rise early morning and also late in the evening. So the study concludes by telling that the metabolism which is observed in certain patients, which can be seen, which we have seen, which is associated with decreased sleep. For example, insomnia or shift workers who have sleep disorders or obstructive sleep apnea. The worsening of metabolic control, we have seen patients with high fasting blood glucose in that subset, and also more of cardiometabolic events. This is correlated with the decreased sleep cycle and the metabolic fate of these molecules, which is determined by the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Maybe some genetic changes are seen in these individuals. So there are certain epigenetic factors which are linked to the transcription factors also. So long-term disruption of the circadian rhythm, as we know, is associated with increased events and also poor metabolic health. So the mechanistic aspect, how this is happening, they have seen that it is probably a direct disruption of the signaling pathway of the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and which have led to this. So I think that's all. That those are the 2 studies which was given to me. One, as we have seen, is a non-human primate study where the metabolic health has been disrupted, where the time-restricted eating pattern has been shown to improve compared to ad libitum round-the-clock intake of food. The second is drosophila study, where they've seen that, yes, the mechanism of the disruption of the endocrine pathway and also the neural pathway is probably due to the genetic mediation of the suprachiasmatic signaling, which gets faulty in these individuals who are where there's a disruption of the circadian rhythm. I think that's it. Thank you.